Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Let's Eat. It is truthfully, I think, my favorite part of the week. It is a Sunday morning. I have lots of water with me, some lemon and salt. As you know, that's my usual morning beverage. And then I also have a cup of coffee with a scoop of protein powder in it. And I just love this morning energy. I think I've said to you many times before, I just love the mornings and I feel like I could conquer the world. I could truly just conquer the world first thing in the morning between the hours of like 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. I would imagine it's likely due to the cortisol peak that happens first thing in the morning, which for those of you who don't know, cortisol does peak first thing in the morning, or it should. And this is where we feel that alertness, that wakefulness, that productivity. And so that is what I am assuming is kicking in every morning for me. But usually, this is when I like to record podcasts because I feel the most energized and the most ready to rock. And not to mention, I have a full day ahead of me of work and getting myself in gear. I'm working quite a bit at the restaurant this week, so I need to kind of get ahead as far as the week goes. So that is what we're doing today. It's going to be a healthy balance of reading and enjoying and cleaning, and then also preparing myself for the week, which is my favorite type of Sunday. Truly my favorite type of Sunday. And also today, I think is going to be the last day that we see weather in the 60s in November. The rest of this week looks like we're headed to the average being 40s and 50s. So we're also going to take advantage. Me and Tally are going to head out for a walk at some point. So by the time you listen to this day will have come and gone. But I just thought I would give you the scoop on, on what I'm up to today. And I love the quote, and I say this a ton: a Sunday well spent brings a week of content. So, how can you spend your Sundays preparing for a week of content? That is really my suggestion for you. So today we're diving into all things painful cycles. And painful cycles can look like a number of different things, but this is really going to fall under the umbrella of women's women's hormone health, women's PMS. I guess only women have PMS, so PMS. And just this kind of cultural narrative that we have all just accepted as women. I want to talk a little bit more about women's hormone health as a whole in our curriculum in health class and spoiler alert, it's more like the lack thereof, because I know for me, I did not have any kind of hormonal education in my middle school, elementary school, high school science health classes. And a lot, if not all, of what I learned about women's health and specifically women's hormone health came from my own journey and my own investment. And so that said, not everyone is taking holistic health certifications. Not everyone is in the health space. And so that is frustrating because we as women have no idea anything about our hormone health and what hurts it and what supports it. And don't get me wrong, I think a lot of the research is still developing, which is a true shame. I mean, women weren't in research until like the 90s. So we're still in that infancy phase of when women are actually being studied and we're actually understanding women's cycles. So time will definitely expand on this and we'll be able to have a little bit more of an understanding there. But for now, it is largely missing from our understanding of health, and that is a problem. So, ladies, this is for you. This is going to be your Hormones 101 hormone survival guide because I know so many women. I would say and I could be wrong, but 9 out of 10 women experience some form of hormonal symptom at some point during their cycle, at some point during the month. And I think the biggest disappointment is the fact that our healthcare system meets any kind of hormonal concern with here's a prescription for birth control, and we're not really given the tools or understanding as to how are all these other influences impacting my hormones. This is a key takeaway is mostly, I don't want to generalize it and say all, but most hormonal issues are not a hormonal problem. They are the influences of what's going on systemically that's going to then influence the delicate balance that is our hormones. And that, I think, is something that we don't talk about because we go to our specialist, our hormone health, women's health specialists, to address issues in our hormones, but we're not looking at it through what's going on in our blood sugar, what's going on in our gut, what's going on in our liver, our stress levels, all of these kind of influences that have a large impact on our hormones. And so we're looking at it as just a hormone problem when it's more than just that, right? We are one whole body. And so we have to be looking at it systemically. And that's one of the best parts. I think one of my favorite parts about functional labs is it does give us that information for us to then say, okay, what's going on in these other systems that could potentially be influencing what my hormones look like, and why I'm feeling the way I feel. So this is what we're going to get into today with a special focus on painful cycles and PMS. And I'm going to share a little bit about my journey and what I've learned and give you some tools and greater understanding. Maybe this is something that you've never heard about before. Maybe you know somebody who needs to hear this. If that is the case, please send them this episode. It's super important that this message is heard by as many women as possible, just because it's so much more upstream. And we also have terribly normalized this concept that we should be in pain or struggling, one time a month, many times a month, whether it's through certain, our luteal phase or ovulatory phase, experiencing pain and heavy bleeding, and it just doesn't have to be that way. Especially, given the fact that there's so much that can be done about it. So thank you for being here. I'm excited to dive into this episode today and give you some knowledge and enforcement and reinforcement rather, and maybe some guidance on what can be done, and hopefully give you a little bit more clarity on why this might be happening for you. So thank you for being here. Welcome back to the table, and let's eat. Welcome to Let's Eat. I'm your host, Emily, certified holistic health coach, functional nutrition expert, and self-proclaimed wellness enthusiast, here to meet you at the intersection of physical and mental health, the space within which we become well. This podcast is meant to explore all areas of mind and body wellness, designed to offer you the integrative knowledge, behavioral strategies, and mindset shifts necessary to uplevel your health and feel better today. We'll explore nutrition, sleep, movement, self-care and stress management, habits and routines, self-development, gut health, mental health, and more. I'm so happy that you're here. Welcome to the table. Let's eat. So I want to dive into my personal experience with this topic and then also give you some statistics, just because why not give you the cold, hard facts of the matter, right? Let's get into what this looks like nationwide. Kind of our methodology or approach to these issues, and then dive into why this is happening. So let's start with the statistics. Let's start with the facts, okay? Estimates suggest that dysmenorrhea, or painful menstruation, affects between 50% and 90%. So my estimate was not off. 9 out of 10 women of adolescent girls and women of reproductive age. One review found prevalence varying between 16 and 91%, depending on definition and population, with severe pain seen in 2% to 29%. Around 80% of women who menstruate experience some menstrual pain at some point in their lifetime. In adolescents and younger women, one report shows roughly 43% of participants reported painful menstruation in every cycle, and 41% reported pain in some cycles. Painful periods are a major cause of impaired daily function. For example, one source says up to 10 to 15% of women miss school or work, which I can relate to, regularly during their periods due to dysmenorrhea. Now, as far as seeking out assistance or medical care when it comes to painful cycles or any kind of issue in that department, A survey of 1,266 university-age women found 88% reported experiencing painful periods, but only 19.1% had consulted a doctor about it. A review article states that for many with dysmenorrhea, many people who menstruate view menstrual pain as an expected part of menses and do not seek out medical care for symptom relief, even if it impairs function. Now, this is important. We'll talk about this later. One paper reported that only 36.9% of women with primary dysmenorrhea sought formal medical advice. Another source noted that approximately 1 in 4 women experience the need for medical intervention regarding their menstrual pain. Now, I then took it a few steps further and looked into what is conventional care for a painful cycle in American healthcare. I was very specific to say American healthcare. So, a provider will take menstrual history, right? So timing, severity, pattern. I know for me personally, I'm pretty sure it's inquiring, are my periods regular? Which I will say, and this is just a caveat to that, I think that is a hard question to ask because define regular. Define regular. I think people think regular means, oh, I get it every month, which, okay, yes, but what is your cycle length? Are some weeks you 20 days? Are some weeks you 26? There are some months you 26 days, right? I think defining regular is an important clarification that needs to be made. And then the next steps, if there are red flags like heavy bleeding, abnormal discharge, non-cyclic pain, change in pattern, that further evaluation for secondary causes, endometriosis, fibroids, pelvic infection is recommended. Now, the first line of treatment for any kind of issue, dysmenorrhea pain, pharmacologic, right? So use NSAIDs to reduce uterine prostaglandin activity and relieve any kind of cramping. Hormonal, right? Use of combined oral hormonal contraceptives or other hormonal methods to suppress or, and I'm putting air quotes around this word, regulate the menstrual cycle and thereby reduce pain. So that's the primary approach. There's then clarification around adjunctive and non-pharmacologic care, so advice on heat therapy, so heating pads, which is good to see, exercise, lifestyle modifications, possibly dietary adjustments if initial treatments don't resolve symptoms, referral for imaging, and whatnot. So it looks as though it's pretty cookie cutter here, right? Use NSAIDs. If it becomes unbearable, you could also reach for the birth control option. Obviously, these are more common, I would argue, and I'm sure anyone listening maybe has encountered this with their healthcare provider. Maybe they have gone the hormonal route. I think that's what I hear from clients. That's a large reason why clients are on birth control. It's not because of the contraceptive piece. It's because of the fact that they had, hormonal concerns as far as like pain and whatnot, or heavy cycles or acne or whatever the case is associated with their cycle. And so the doctor said, okay, here is the solution. So, just as an aside here, obviously, I'm going to be talking a ton about birth control and a ton about cycle health and whatnot. I want to be very clear that I am not anti birth control. I think, yes, I think it is too easily prescribed, but I feel that way about antibiotics. I feel that way about any kind of other medication. And I think there is a time and place for medication. I just don't think that we are educated enough. Educated enough, period. All right. Just that's it. Educated enough. Okay. But especially as it relates to birth control, is we're not educated on what it's doing to the body, what it's doing to the gut, what it's doing to our nutritional status, how it's influencing us, and what alternative measures there could be. Now, I say this because I would argue, and obviously I'm coming from more of a biased standpoint, but I would argue that if women were given the knowledge of, okay, hey, listen, this is one option, right? Going the pharmaceutical route is one option. And I feel this way about a lot of things, okay? So this is not just for women's health. I feel this way about a lot of things. If, for example, the doctor said, okay, this is one route you could take. And also, this is another route that could be taken through lifestyle and dietary changes, which, yes, it is listed here as being an option. I would argue most women, I don't say most women, I would say some women, a solid percentage of women, especially now in 2025, I feel like a lot of people are taking more holistic routes and don't want to go the medication route. I think a lot of people would be willing to go that route and invest in that area. I just don't think that we're given the option, and I don't think our healthcare system is given the education to lead them in that direction. And that's not their fault. That is our medical education system's fault, that they're not giving the tools. It makes me wonder, why as an FDN, why as a holistic health coach, why am I getting the knowledge and why am I seeing success with this knowledge, right? It'd be one thing if I was getting this knowledge, learning about the liver, the gut, all the relationship that it has with our hormones, and then no one was getting better. Then I'd be like, okay, wait, what's going on here? Right? Is it me, or is it this knowledge? Is it this approach? Like, what's going on here? But I have seen success with it around painful cycles. So with that said, why are we not going this way always? Because not only is it better for you in the immediate term, yeah, does it take investment? Does it take time? Does it take patience? No doubt. And are NSAIDs and other, approaches to addressing painful cycles a good option in the interim to bring you relief? No doubt. No doubt, right? I don't want to tell you like, okay, yeah, this is going to suck for probably another 6 months, but just know on the end of the 6 months you'll be golden, right? No, I want to give you relief now. So there's going to be routes that we take that can do that. However, why is this not something that's standardized? Like, why is this not something that we are doing? Why do I, as an FDN, a non-medical professional, a non-MD, have this knowledge? And me, along with many other women and individuals in the functional health space, and why is this not more commonplace to talk about when we have seen success and there's research to support that this makes sense? It makes sense. It makes sense. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I wanted to just start with some statistics. I know for me, and I guess we'll segue into my own life. I have notoriously had pretty painful cycles, I'll say. I don't want to say, every single cycle has been the worst of all pain in the world. My first day, I'm usually pretty crampy. We'll just call it how it is. And I, like many other women, never considered it doesn't have to be this way. I just assumed, and I think there has to be someone listening, if not multiple women listening. And according to the statistics, too, it sounds like it is a very widespread kind of assumption or narrative that we bought into, that we as women have to just suffer this time of the month. And this allows us to then justify eating whatever we want and doing whatever we want because I'm on my period, so I'm allowed. This is okay, right? And loading up on my doll and loading up on all of these things to take the pain away, possibly missing school, possibly missing work. In high school, I remember coming home from school because I was in so much pain. And I've had that in adulthood too, where it's been so uncomfortable. I've had to either clear my mornings, or I'm trying to think, or even at bartending. I certainly, I've been there long enough that there's had to have been a time where I've been in tremendous pain, where I've taken off because of it, right? And it's just so interesting that we have just kind of decided collectively as a female population, like, yeah, this is just how it goes. And I know for me, like, I'm a mild case. I mean, I know women, and I've seen women who have incredibly painful cycles days at a time, and not to mention, maybe it's not just not exclusive to period pain, but maybe it's ovulation pain, or maybe it's luteal discomfort, right? Like mood swings. And that's like a large percentage of the month. If you're having pain in ovulation, if you're having pain in your luteal phase, you're having pain in your cycle, my dear, that is like a large percentage of the month, and that's not okay. And I probably should back up here and give you some 101 on your stages, your phases of your cycle, because I'm over here throwing out these words and maybe you don't know about these words. So let me give you the basics of a woman's cycle. Okay. So quick sidestep here to give you the lowdown on what's happening with every phase of our cycle. So we have our menstrual phase. That obviously is when we get our period. And this is the shedding of our uterine lining from the previous cycle. So our estrogen or progesterone are both low. And the pituitary gland secretes FSH, which is follicle stimulating hormone, to recruit new follicles in the ovaries. Okay, so none of us are unfamiliar with what happens during our period. Obviously, this is a time where most women struggle the most. Then we have our follicular phase. And during this phase, FSH continues to stimulate follicle growth in the ovaries. Those follicles start to produce estrogen, which gradually rises. And rising estrogen does two things. It thickens the uterine lining and it increases cervical fluid. Now, luteinizing hormone, or LH, starts to rise toward ovulation. So after our follicular phase, we move into ovulation. And obviously, we as women know, at least I hope that we know, during ovulation is when we are most likely to become pregnant. That's when we should try to become pregnant. So, a surge in that LH, or luteinizing hormone, triggers ovulation, and this releases a mature egg. Estrogen peaks right before ovulation, and progesterone begins to rise as the corpus luteum forms from the ruptured follicle. All right. So, usually during our follicular and ovulatory phases, that's when we might feel more energetic, we might feel more confident. This is usually when it's recommended to do higher impact workouts. So if you're looking through the lens of cycle syncing, which I have mixed feelings on cycle syncing, but if you are someone who's interested in cycle syncing, basically you are creating a workout plan and a nutrition plan based on where you fall in your cycle. It's kind of like what is most appropriate based on what your hormones look like at that moment in time, because obviously our hormones, as I'm sharing, they fluctuate and change over the course of the month. A real good book on cycle syncing is called In the Flow. In the Flow. I just had to turn around to look at my bookshelf. Alyssa Vitti is a tremendous resource for that. I will put the details for that in the show notes if you want to read a little bit more on it. Now, during our luteal phase, which is typically a time where women tend to not feel their best, progesterone dominates, so we might feel more tired during this phase. And what happens with the progesterone is it stabilizes the uterine lining and supports a calm, grounded mood. So if no fertilization occurs, progesterone and estrogen gradually decline toward the end of this phase, and then this triggers our next cycle. So during our luteal phase, this is typically, like I said, where people just don't feel their best coming from ovulation. Ovulation, we're feeling ready to rock. We might have enhanced libido. We might feel like our skin is looking better, all of these things. And then moving into our luteal phase, we maybe don't feel so great. Then that's when we have our cycle, right? So in my brain, it makes more sense to go follicular, ovulatory, luteal, menstrual, but it's technically menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, luteal. And that's a little bit about what's going on. And so what's unfortunate is women who have real severe hormonal issues, they can sometimes have pain. I mean, sometimes they have pain the whole month, right? But there's people who report, I have ovulation pain, or I can feel myself ovulating. There's people who do not feel well, like as far as like mood and energy and whatnot during their luteal phase. And then obviously the obvious issues that come along with painful cycles, right? During your menstrual phase, it can be backaches, it can be nausea, it can be tender breasts, it can be heavy flow, it can be cramping, it can be all sorts of wonderful things that we as women get to experience. So just so that you have that kind of crash course on what happens. Now, needless to say, men do not have this. And so we have a very different biological picture in comparison to what men experience. Obviously learning about the basics of what the course of our month looks like and what's happening, we are all over the place. And so not only do we have to be cognizant of that in terms of hormonal testing, that is one thing that I do with my saliva testing, is clients have to test between days 18 and 21 of their cycle, which is their luteal phase, because of what we're looking for in terms of the hormonal picture. But also, and postmenopausal women, they are testing it at any point in time because it's irrelevant at that point to try and, they're not ovulating anymore. So it doesn't matter. But, it's just very different. between what we see with men. And that's why so many health strategies and so many biohacks that we see, we're learning more and more they're not helpful or productive for women to be implementing because of their cycle. I mean, fasting, great example. Women who are postmenopausal, yes, it might be more effective for men to fast. It has a completely different impact on a men's system, a man's system than a women's. Oh my God, I just did it again. A woman's system, especially if they're premenopausal. If and you're premenopausal, you are still cycling. Okay, so this can be someone who's 15. This can be somebody who's 45. And if you are trying to fast thinking that is a good option and you're not considering the hormonal impact, I mean, I had a client who I just started working with in the summer. She's actually a close family friend of mine, and she lost her cycle after, going hard in the fasting department, and she didn't have a cycle. She's 22 years old. And so we worked for a couple weeks on just restoring her nutrition. And, while wasn't 4 weeks that her cycle came back, I told her after we were done working for those few weeks, I said, just keep doing this. Just keep doing this. Fasting is a no-go. Start nourishing your body. Start, nourishing the repleted nutrition that has now been, taken away from your body, and just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I got a message last week or the week before that her cycle is back. And I am so happy about it. That makes me so happy. And honestly, this would be a population that I would feel called to working with specifically because of how many women are walking around without cycles, and it's as abnormal. But just know that there are different hormonal changes that happen over the course of a month, and it's going to be different than a man. That's what I want you to take away here. So, what I really want to start with here is the upstream influences that impact the hormonal picture. Now, everything I share today, I just don't think it's plausible for me to cover every single topic because every person is so individual and complex. So I'm really just going to give kind of like the most common issues that I'm seeing, that are seen, and kind of drill the idea home. Like, the overwhelming message that I want you to take away from this is the fact that your cycle and the health of your cycle is a byproduct of the environment of the body. Now, I had Vicky on my podcast last year, probably last spring. She is, I forget her exact title, but she does a lot of hormonal health, women's fertility health type of work. She's in New Jersey as well, so it was cool to connect with her. And I'll never forget this. She said, our period is our monthly report card. It is a way for us to understand, how am I doing? Right? And women are lucky. Men don't have that. I think we have this idea that our periods are a pain, like literally and figuratively. Our periods are a nuisance, that they are disruptive. But if we reframe the way we see them, we can be so grateful that we have something that allows us to get a real clear insight on, how is my health? Because our periods are signs of health. Our periods are signs of health. And having a period at all is a sign of health. And having a painless or minimally painful period is also a beautiful sign of health. Having a regular cycle, having a healthy flow, all of these pieces are signs of good health. And I don't think we look at it that way. And I want you to start to look at it that way. I want you to start to look at it that way. And if I'm going to say this too, if you are perimenopausal, because I know a lot of my listeners are perimenopausal, postmenopausal, I want you to think back to what your cycle was like in your teens, in your 20s, in your 30s, and then think about, what was my experience like in perimenopause? What is my experience like right now? What was my experience going through menopause if I am postmenopausal? Because I firmly believe, and goes back to the episode that I talked about what you can do in your 20s, 30s, and 40s to have a better 50s, 60s, and 70s. Go listen to that episode if you're interested. It's only from a couple weeks ago. I am such a big believer that if you take care of yourself in all ways, but especially as it relates to your period, right? Where if you notice there are problems in your cycle, or you're prone to ovarian cysts, or whatever, right? Like all of these things that are very reproductive in nature, if you focus on them in your 20s, your perimenopausal experience, your menopausal, your postmenopausal experience is largely going to look better because you took the time to take care of your hormones in your 20s. Now, I will say, if you were in your 20s, in the 80s, in the 90s, and that ship has come and gone, right? And you probably didn't know about this because guess what? Women were not included in research until like 1993. And not only that, I mean, this information just was not something that was talked about. So I'm not trying to say like, oh, too bad. I think there's still a lot you can do in your 50s, 60s, and 70s to reduce inflammation and to address your health and whatnot. But if you've gone through your cycling age and you're now beyond that, I just want you to look at what was it like for me in that, what was my experience like, and just cross compare a little bit. Did I have a smooth sailing perimenopausal experience? Did I have a smooth sailing menopausal experience, right? What was that like for me? Because I believe that if I can intercept women in their teens, 20s, and 30s and help them address their hormonal balance at this age, I do believe that their perimenopausal, postmenopausal, menopausal journey will be better, because if they're addressing their hormonal picture now and getting their gut and their liver in line and whatnot, which we'll talk about, they will have a more successful experience and a more smooth transition as they move through the different hormonal stages of life. That I believe. Now, is this one size fits all? Absolutely not. But I think generally speaking, that is what the lack of information is. And I can't tell you how many women who are perimenopausal. I know I have podcast listeners who are clients of mine who come to me. They're like, what the heck is going on here? Why is this happening? Why am I gaining weight when I'm not changing anything? Why am I doing this? Why am I feeling this way? Why are my cycles this way? Why? And they're not getting the information. I took such a deep dive into perimenopause probably in the spring into the summer. Still am. I actually just bought a new book that I'm going to start reading because while that's not my niche per se, that's not necessarily like the women that I am, specifically seeing. I had so many women come to me this summer, perimenopausal women who are like, what in the world is going on? Can you help me? I'm not getting help anywhere else. And I wanted to help them. I want to be able to help every single person that comes to me. Is that possible? No. Am I ambitious around it? Yes. But at the end of the day, if I can at least give education on what is happening here, that is worthwhile. That is powerful because these women are just not getting the help that they need. And there's a lot that can be done through diet and lifestyle through this transition to make it a little bit more bearable because a lot of women are struggling. So, I don't know how I got here, but I got here. But anyways, what I want to also make sure that I said this before and I kind of got off on a tangent. What else is new? I want you to remember, no matter where you are in your hormonal journey, and I'm so glad this makes me so happy that I have this platform to be able to just give like this PSA to every person listening, because it's going to impact you no matter if you're a woman, if you are a female who at one point in life had a cycle or are currently cycling, this is relevant to you. So, please listen up. Your hormonal picture is not the problem. It is the result of the problem. There are upstream influences that create a downstream effect on your very fragile hormonal balance. And so, as a result of that, we are seeing dysfunction in the hormonal arena, as in painful cycles, as in PMS, as in perimenopause, dreadful perimenopause, as in menopause. And what you're doing in terms of inflammation, in terms of detox, in terms of gut dysfunction, in terms of mineral depletion, in terms of stress, is going to impact the communication that is happening and the balance that exists within your sex hormones. It is not an isolated event. It is a downstream effect of what is happening in these other areas. So, if you start to look at it this way, you open your eyes to an entirely different perspective that I would put lots of money on your primary care doctor or your gynecologist is not giving you in their office. They're not. And I am not trying to say I know more than a medical professional. You know how I feel about this. I am never going to try and come across in that way because I don't, right? But I do know that this is true. And I can speak from first-hand experience, and I can also speak from my work with clients that this is true. I want you to think about your cycle as being like an orchestra, and the hormones are your instruments, and your gut, liver, your adrenal glands, all of that are the conductors that are keeping them in sync. And so if you are looking at it through this lens, I love that analogy, you can better understand, okay, I'm not necessarily in need of, like, yeah, you can support healthy progesterone production. You can support, these areas that are more kind of like, okay, this is the problem. This is how I can go about it type of thing, like more narrow. But instead, I want you to open your lens so that you're looking at, well, what's your digestion like? What does your lifestyle look like? What do your stress levels look like? And what can I do about those areas to then have that downstream impact? Because ultimately, the root of it, while I have mixed feelings about the need to find the root, I think what's most important is just restoring balance and addressing dysfunction. And if I do that, then the root is not really relevant. However, if we know that the root is coming more upstream, then we're not bothered. We're not distracted by, oh, what's the progesterone, the estrogen? No, it's why are these issues happening and what can I do about it more upstream? Because likely that's going to then improve every other area of your health, right? That is really what it is. Because it's not like, oh, this downstream impact is just affecting my sex hormones, it's affecting everything else. So if we go upstream and keep going upstream until we get to like, oh, this is where this originates, then we can resolve that dysfunction and it's going to have that downstream impact on your hormones as well. So let's talk a little bit about low progesterone and estrogen dominance. I want to just spend some time here because I feel like this is a really, really valuable conversation to have. And it is something that I have been seeing in labs. And so I think it's probably like if I given the populations that I'm working with and given it's just a subset of the greater population, but how common it is in this population that I'm working with, I'd imagine that it's probably very much widespread in other women as well. And so by taking my knowledge about what I'm doing with my clients and being able to dispel this information to you, you might be able to then think about, okay, what do I need to be doing? What are my next steps? Because it sounds like me, because this resonates, because this is something that I'm navigating too. So, when we talk about low progesterone, like I said, it's not about saying, okay, well, I have low progesterone, so I need to address the low progesterone. Yes, there are ways for us to bring in hormonal support as an FDN that will help to bring up those levels of progesterone so that you can feel some relief. But we want to call into question, why is there low progesterone? Now, when we have low progesterone, a big, big driver of this is chronic stress. And the reason being is because cortisol and progesterone are both produced, put it simply, through pregnenolone. Pregnenolone is the parent hormone to cortisol and progesterone. And what happens here is during times of chronic stress, the body is intelligent. The body is intuitive. It knows what it needs to do to keep you alive. And at that moment in time, the body is not like, oh, we're going to prioritize reproductive health over survival. That's really what we're going to do. We're going to do this. I want to be sure that this body can reproduce. But if we're in immediate, imminent danger, which most cases you're not in imminent danger, it's just your body's perception of it, your body's not going to prioritize reproductive health over your survival, right? That's just not going to happen. So, what happens here, and I think it used to be called a pregnenolone steal. I don't know if it's still called that. Truthfully, I'm not totally sure. However, in simple terms, the body takes the pregnenolone and says we need to shunt this towards the cortisol production pathway because we need more cortisol in order to keep the body running and alive and out of danger, right? So what does this mean for progesterone? It means the body's going to downregulate the production of progesterone in an attempt to address the elevated need for cortisol. So this is such a common issue that I see. I think low progesterone, I have low progesterone. I am working with tons of clients who have low progesterone. This is not uncommon. And what happens here is, to kind of put it very simply, estrogen and progesterone need to come into balance. They need to be in balance. There's a lot of checks and balance systems within the body. If you've worked with me now with functional labs, I've walked you through your lab results and I've said, this is another balance, this is another balance, this is another balance, because there's a lot of hormones that need to remain in balance, or not hormones, I'm going to say all systems that need to remain in balance in order for them to operate well. Now, that's not to say that having it, high or low, one of the other isn't still valuable, but the balance is what we look at. And the reason being is if I have low progesterone, but I have healthy estrogen, there is still going to be something called estrogen dominance present. And estrogen dominance, I believe, is probably one of the most common issues that women are navigating when it comes to painful cycles. And this means that there's an imbalance of estrogen to progesterone. This does not mean that there's high estrogen. Okay, there can be high estrogen, but it means that there's more estrogen to progesterone, and so that balance is off. And with with estrogen dominance, this can lead to heavy bleeding, breast tenderness, mood swings, painful, clotty periods, right? And that is what I believe to be a big reason why women are having painful cycles is the chronic stress, the body's inability to detox excess estrogen, which was my personal issue. I had a lot of issues in like the detox department. And so given the fact that I had excess estrogen, that led me into estrogen dominance. So that's something that I continually work on, right? So in that case, right, we need to work on why is there an imbalance here? What is going on? Whether it's the body's production of estrogen, it's the body's inability to detox estrogen, chronic stress, lowering my progesterone. What is happening here? Am I being exposed to too many xenoestrogens, which is kind of like the toxins that act like estrogen within the body that are coming from our plastics and whatnot? What is going on that's throwing this hormonal picture off balance? And how do I move into that upstream direction in order to address that imbalance? Now, like I said, it's not just about the progesterone, it's not just about the estrogen, it's about the balance there. And why there's an imbalance, there's always something that probably is not about the estrogen or progesterone per se, it's about the body's systemic picture that determines why that hormonal balance looks the way that it does. Now, to even go a little bit further upstream, when inflammation is present, okay, most of us are very inflamed. If we have any kind of issue, symptom wise, we're probably looking at a picture of inflammation. This can be from gut infection, so this can be from pathogenic presence, which we see a lot in our stool analyses. Blood sugar instability, which is something I'm so passionate about. Holy cow, I could talk about metabolic health and blood sugar health forever. Stress, right? Toxins, and maybe a combination of these things, the body is then going to produce more prostaglandins. And usually, an excess of prostaglandins, this is where we see cramps, nausea, back pain. Excuse me. And this is what's happening is it's compounding the uterine contractions. So just inflammation in general, right? Going through a stressful time, your period can be more painful. Or if you're just chronically inflamed, you're just living in a space of inflammation, right? Which is the nature of many, many women. Most women are inflamed in some form or fashion, just given it's just so widespread. We are going to see a greater susceptibility to these prostaglandins, which is what's creating some of that pain during your cycle. So this ties into that estrogen dominance, right? Because if you're estrogen dominant, there is that, inflammation present, but this expands well beyond that into gut infections, blood sugar imbalances, stress, psychological stress, right? Not just physiological stress, but psychological stress. Toxins we're exposed to, which overburdens the liver, which is going to drive up our liver congestion, which is probably going to put us in a greater spot where estrogen is circulating through the body. I mean, you see how there's just such an overlap. There's such an overlap amidst all of these concepts, and it's not meant to overwhelm you. It's just meant to inform you about the multitude of upstream effects that impact this orchestra, we'll call it, that then manifests as a painful cycle. And this goes back to signs of health. This goes back to signs of health. If there is irregularity, if there is, a pain, if there's pain associated with your cycle, any kind of issue, if your flow is wicked, right? Like anything of that capacity, this is showing us that there is dysfunction. And how beautiful is that we as women have this opportunity to look at our health through this specific marker, we'll call it, as a way to determine, is there inflammation, is there stress present, and what should I do about it? Now, speaking of blood sugar balance, that's also something that I think is important because as we know, if you have listened to me speak ever in my in my life, I share this statistic all the time that 93% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. And so while this isn't necessarily exclusive to women, this is major. This is huge because of the fact that when we are metabolically unhealthy, that means we are more susceptible to painful cycles because of what we know about metabolic health. And it's not exclusive to just painful cycles. We're more we are more prone to type 2 diabetes. We are more prone to PCOS. We're more prone to cancer. We're more prone to all of these issues. And your blood sugar directly impacts your sex hormones. And this is because of the impact that it has on cortisol and also just putting your body in a more inflamed state. If you have higher cortisol as a result of these blood sugar swings, that's going to go back to what I had mentioned about pregnenolone and that pregnenolone steal. But you also are just more inflamed, and everything becomes more challenging when you are inflamed. Everything becomes more faulty or harder to operate when you are inflamed. And so that is a huge foundational talk about upstream. That's like the top of the stream, right? That is something that is just so foundational from like a nutrition and lifestyle perspective that we all need to be doing more of so that it can trickle down into what our experience is like in other areas. Now, I said before too about proper estrogen clearance, and this is something that I navigated. So I'll give you a little bit kind of my story that I'm still continually working on. I learned, oh my God, you guys know I love this sentence. I learned through genetic testing. I say that every episode, but I did. I learned through genetic testing that I have issues with detox. And not to mention, like, I've never actually taken a deep dive into liver health or my detox up until like maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago. And so for me personally, I learned liver health is everything. I actually was just talking to a customer about this the other day, and it was actually cool. He was like, "Yeah, liver health is everything." I'm like, I literally know. I'm so happy to hear you say that. I'm like, I agree with you. I don't get to have this conversation very often. I mean, especially not at the restaurant when I'm serving alcohol to all my customers and they're not concerned with their liver health, right? But all jokes aside, we were talking about liver health. But anyways, when your body is overburdened, when your liver is overburdened, estrogen can be reabsorbed into our circulation because our liver is responsible for metabolizing hormones. This is a big reason why when working with clients who are coming off birth control, there's a heavy emphasis on liver detox and supporting the liver because through that transition, we want the body to be able to break down and metabolize the excess estrogen so that we're not seeing this estrogen recirculation reabsorbed through the body. And what's interesting is we look at a marker called beta glucuronidase on someone's functional lab. This is in a GI map and a stool analysis, and this can tell us a ton, especially when we see that there's high estrogen through your labs and we correlate that with your beta glucuronidase, which is an enzyme. If there's high in both of those departments, we can see that there is liver congestion going on where the body is not able to properly metabolize estrogen. And this was the case for me. And this is a big reason why I have been so passionate about liver health because it's unfortunately, I think this goes well beyond just painful cycles. I think issues like this, low progesterone, high estrogen, this can lead to a lot of worse off outcomes. And I don't mean that in a scary way. I don't mean that in a this is what's definitely going to happen, but it goes beyond just painful cycles. I'm just going to leave it at that. And I think there is a lot more evidence accumulating around the connection with excess estrogen and breast cancer. And I think the rise in breast cancer, especially in younger women, has a lot to do with this. But without going too far into that topic of conversation, if your liver cannot detox estrogen well or properly, it is going to be recirculated. And the liver has 100 other jobs more than that to worry about. And it's working overtime to try and detox as it is with all the fragrance we're putting on our skin. That's why I'm so passionate about talking about making non-toxic swaps and so forth. But the liver is taking on the brunt of the work around all of these other toxins, it is, of course, it's not going to have time to do the estrogen. Estrogen's going to have to wait in line because it's working to try and do everything else, and we're not giving it a break, so it's not going to be able to detox estrogen the way that it should. So that is really, really big. It is, like I said, its role is it's got many a role, but it metabolizes and clears estrogen through detox. We have two phases of detox, and this can lead to estrogen buildup in the bloodstream. And not only that, kind of as a side, I guess it's not a side step, but phase one, phase two detox, then you have phase three detox. And phase three detox is peeing and having regular bowel movements and sweating. Because even if phase one and phase two are strong, where the body is breaking down the toxin, that's essentially what's happening, to put it simply. Phase one, the body's breaking down the toxin. Phase two, it's packaging it up by pairing it with a binder so that it can be released from the body. If phase three is not strong, that we're not going to the bathroom regularly and we're not drinking a lot of fluids and eating enough fiber and sweating, it's not going to be effectively removed from the body. So that leads me to my next statement: constipation. Women who are constipated have a ton of a greater susceptibility to hormonal issues and this liver buildup and estrogen problems and whatnot, because if you're not detoxing your hormones through going to the bathroom regularly, that is just waste that is sitting in your system. And a client of mine comes to mind. We worked together for a couple weeks. I mean, we could work for longer, but I'm saying when we first started working together, she had uh, quite a few hormonal reports, or complaints rather. And she told me she was only going to the bathroom like every 2 weeks. And that alarmed me a lot. And that is always going to be my primary. I mean, I wish, like, part of me wishes that, no, not part of me wishes. I think I could just work with women on getting them to go to the bathroom regularly, and I would say probably 50% of their problems would improve. Like, truthfully. Truthfully, I like that. I feel like is like the key. So what we did was we started her on some water and some lemon and some salt first thing in the morning, and your girl since April has been going to the bathroom every single day, every single day, and her life has changed. And I say that not because she has said my life has changed. I'm saying that because I know her life has changed. Because you cannot be healthy if you are not moving your bowels. You can't. And we have become so normalized around not going to the bathroom. And I feel so strongly about this, like the strongest I've ever felt about going to the bathroom on a regular basis, and how key it is that you can detox properly. I swear that could be like my business model is getting people to relieve constipation. And like, we want to understand why the body's not going in the first place, and usually that's a little bit deeper than just like getting them to go. Like, the first order of business, especially when it comes to pathogen eradication, is to be sure that you're going regularly. So sometimes that means coming in with more of like this like allopathic approach, where we put you on something like a magnesium. I have this one product that I use with clients a ton that helps them go regularly, just to kind of get things moving, because we can't do productive work if you're still not going to the bathroom every day. But usually doing that productive work will allow you to then go on your own without needing that support, if you understand what I'm saying. So we just start by bringing in some support so that it induces the elimination, but we want to get to a point where we clarify why you're not going on your own. So now I just took a little bit of a trip down constipation lane, but it's fine. We're tapping into everything that has to do with this topic today. So ladies, if you are not going to the bathroom, you know where to find me. I feel like this is my one of my favorite things to work on with clients, but please look into that further, because you need to be going to the bathroom. Something else that is also now part of my work is focusing on mineral balance through the hair tissue mineral analysis, which is the new lab that I'm including in my work and is included in Back to Body, is looking at your minerals and your mineral foundation, because your minerals are needed for hormone production, they're needed for detoxification. So minerals like magnesium, zinc, copper, so important for so many different areas of our hormonal picture. And unfortunately, mineral depletion accompanies stress, poor digestion, heavy bleeding, right? And so it kind of leads us into this vicious cycle of, if I'm not absorbing my minerals, which is very common, malabsorption is like a huge, huge thing here. If I'm not eating enough foods that are rich in minerals, which not to mention our mineral supply is so different in terms of our food source. Our soil is just no longer as mineral rich as it used to be. So our food is then impacted by that. And then we obviously see that in, if we're consuming this food and we're not getting the most out of it, then, you can see how this can be a problem. But then we see ourselves stressed, which impacts like all these other examples that I gave you. But then poor digestion, right? Any kind of GI issue, if you're constipated, if you have leaky gut, if you have a pathogen, if you have dysbiosis, if you have any issue in that department, that's going to create low stomach acid. That is hallmark for malabsorption of minerals. Not to mention, you need zinc to produce stomach acid, but you need stomach acid to produce zinc. So, like, let that sink in, right? And if we're bleeding a ton, right? I had somebody, oh my goodness. As most of you know, I'm part of the Facebook group. It's called Ladies of, and I'm not gonna say the county because that's where I grew up, but it's a local ladies group that is probably, I think there's like 17,000, 18,000 women in it. And women go in there and ask questions around cycle health. And most of you who are from this area, you know what I'm talking about. And it can be a great resource for a lot of things, right? People who are looking for, and honestly, some of my clients have found me from that page. So I'm grateful for it. It's a great resource. It's a good tool to look at, like, oh, I'm looking for a restaurant that serves this, or I'm looking for a chiropractor that does this, or, whatever. So somebody goes in there and says, my daughter is dealing with really heavy cycles. Or first she starts with, my daughter is low iron. No matter what we do, she, can't seem to keep her iron up. It's almost a shock that she's even still standing up. That's how low her iron is. And then proceeds to share in the post. And also her cycles last weeks at a time. So she asks, what can I do to help this? Should I be giving her an iron supplement? Should I be giving her something about an iron smoothie? Which maybe I just don't know what that is, but I don't know if that was like sarcastic or what. But all of these questions about what can I do about it? And I could not hold back. Okay. And I went right in there. I said, you need to address the fact that she's bleeding for weeks at a time. That is why her iron is so low. She's losing it in her blood that she's bleeding for her cycle. We need to look at the upstream effects here. And so from that comment, I got tons of likes on it. And I always proceed with caution in this group because it can be very controversial. Women have lots of opinions, and I know that not everyone believes what I believe about health and our healthcare system and whatnot. So I want to be sure I tread lightly in that department because I don't want to offend and I don't want to cause chaos. And I also just get very sensitive to like people being mean to me. So I just don't want people to be like, you're wrong, you suck, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Anyways, I should probably get over that. But because I'm speaking the truth here, right? I'm speaking the freaking truth. So if these women have a problem with it, anyways. So I commented that, but that is kind of my point here. We are so depleted, and we as women are more susceptible to depletion if we're on birth control. All right, we're at a greater risk of depletion and deficiency on birth control, things like magnesium, zinc, B vitamins. We bleed every month, so we have a greater need for replenishing. We are chronically stressed. We have poor digestive issues. All of these kind of circulate, right? They're all influencing of each other. And so our mineral balance is essential. So through the hair tissue mineral analysis, that is what we're looking at. And that can be so foundational. That is an inexpensive, low-cost test that tells us a ton of information. I think it's the coolest thing. And we'll be able to use that in Back to Body, which I'm so excited for. So like I said, this episode, I'm almost at an hour long of this episode, and I haven't even scratched the surface. That's not true. I have scratched the surface, but there's so much more that I could get into around this topic and will continue to get into around this topic. But the bottom line here is our narrative, our cultural narrative around painful cycles is BS. Okay, I'm not going to swear here, but I would if I could for this specific sentence. It is BS. And someone needs to hear that. Someone needs to hear that. If you're dealing with a painful cycle, if you have a heavy flow, if you're missing your cycle, if your cycle's irregular, and when I say irregular, I mean some months it's 26 days, some months it's 31 days, some months you don't get it at all, there is more to be identified here. And I encourage you to do that. And lucky for you, Back to Body is now enrolling. And I'm stoked for this. This is me plugging in this opportunity for you to get access to functional labs and to work with me and to uncover the imbalance and the dysfunction that is there for you. Because I'm telling you, your period is your report card, and what it looks like determines your health. And I'm telling you, it is possible to go through a cycle and not have pain. It's possible. It is fully possible. And so I want to help you do that. So in Back to Body, this includes 3 functional labs: the HTMA, the GI map, and the stress and hormone profile. So very geared towards everything we talked about today, looking at your liver, looking at your gut, looking at your hormonal picture, sex hormones, cortisol, and looking at your mineral balance. And from there, we are going to use that data to proceed with a specific protocol that I will create for you that you will then implement over the course of the first few months of 2026. And we will work together on implementing it. I will hold you accountable to it. We will troubleshoot it. We will celebrate all the wins and all the successes and work through all the trials and errors. And I'm so excited because this is the population of women that I know is out there, I know is listening, and I know needs this program. There's no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind that there is someone, at least one person who's listening to this, that needs this. And so that is why I created it. And not to mention, on top of just the individualized protocol and guidance, I am also going to create modules. I've created modules that are around education in women's health. So, on top of what you just learned today, I am creating weekly modules for you to tune into. Nothing intense, nothing like, oh, I have homework to do, or, just me teaching you about women's health and how this can be so supplemental to the journey you're already on, so that every week you're walking away with, I've now implemented knowledge about women's health into my life. I understand why certain things are the way they are. I can maybe share this with a friend or a sister or a mom or a colleague or whatever to help them. But it is just going to bolster your understanding of how the body works, how our hormones interrelate with all these other areas of our health, and then also embark on your own healing journey along the way. And that, I think, is so cool because education is power. Education is so valuable. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, we are just not informed enough about women's health. So I wanted to create a program that allows you to not only feel better, but also learn along the way. And I want to share every single thing that I know about women's health with you so that you can feel more equipped. So at the end of the program, you're not only feeling better and you've addressed these issues fully, but also you feel like you have a wealth of knowledge now to say, I know how to maintain this, and I can also share this with others that I care about, because that's what this is about. It's so important that you're feeling good, but also you have the ability to spread the knowledge and spread the information to others. So I'm so excited. This is so exciting. So, early bird discount is now active. Being a listener of the podcast, you can get an additional discount by using the code B2B podcast when you sign up for your consult. So that essentially is in the appointment description. You can put the code there, and so you'll automatically be entered into not only the early bird discount but also the podcast discount as well. And I'm so stoked. I'm so excited for this. The early bird discount expires on November 19th. So by the time you listen to this, as of today, you'll have 10 days to apply that discount. And testing starts in December, and then we get ready to rock and get going on January 12th, 2026. So you have the first 2 weeks of January to kind of get yourself in gear, and then we start rocking and rolling on the 12th of January. It's a Monday, and from there you'll have all the details as to what the program will look like, what it entail, what to expect. but I am so thrilled. There are limited spots available to this program, so definitely hop on, get your consult scheduled so you can get your spot. And as always, if you have questions for me, you know where to find me. So thank you so much for being here. I love the podcast, as I say that at least once an episode, right? To remind you how much I love this space, but especially when I get to talk about topics that I'm passionate about and give you some education that maybe you didn't have before. That's what I want you to take away from this. If you want to work together one-on-one, if you feel like your needs are more specific or you feel like that is something that's more of interest to you, you know you can always follow the link in the show notes to schedule a consult with me. Or if you're unclear if in full function or back to body is most appropriate for you, you can schedule a call and we can clarify that. And I can give you some direction because, like I said, back to body is a little bit more specific as far as population goes. So in full function might be more appropriate for you. But either way, I look forward to hearing from you. I look forward to supporting you. And in the meantime, be well.